A man is trained to expect one thing from his enemy: cruelty, humiliation, a struggle for survival. So, what happens when that enemy offers you a bar of soap, clean sheets, and a hot meal? When the very thing designed to break your spirit becomes the thing that saves it. This is not a story about the glory of war. This is a story about the quiet power of a made bed. A story where a simple act of cleaning became the most unexpected weapon of all. Get ready for a journey into a World War II POW camp where the greatest battle wasn't fought with guns, but with gestures of basic human kindness. Before we begin this incredible story of resilience and connection, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this directly to you. The Arizona dust was red and unforgiving, settling on everything at Camp Papago Park like a fine, rusty blanket. For Corporal Ben Walker, 24, from Indianapolis, it was a constant enemy. His war wasn't fought in the hedgerows of France or the jungles of the Pacific, but here, in the searing heat of a POW camp guarding the very men his brothers were fighting overseas. Ben believed in order. Order was safety. Order was control. His father, a sheriff, had taught him that. The rules for handling the Japanese prisoners were clear, strict, and designed to prevent conflict. Ben enforced them without question. Across the wire, Lieutenant Akira Tanaka, 28, a former engineer from Kyoto, also believed in order. But his was an order born from discipline, honor, and a profound sense of collective spirit. Captured in the Saipan campaign, he carried the weight of his capture as a personal failure, a stain on his honor. He expected brutality. He expected to be broken. It was what he was prepared for. The first shock was the barracks. It was a simple wooden structure, but it was clean, solid, and had real beds with thin mattresses, not straw on dirt. Akira's unit, under his quiet command, was assigned to one. They stood at attention, waiting for the inevitable harsh commands. But they didn't come. Instead, a young American corporal, Ben, walked in, his posture rigid. He didn't yell. He spoke clearly, slowly, pointing. "You will keep this place clean. You will be responsible for your area. There will be inspections." An interpreter translated. The men remained still, their faces masks of stoic confusion. Then Ben did something inexplicable. He walked to a supply closet and brought out buckets, brushes, soap, and fresh bedding. He laid them in the center of the room. "The rules are posted. Follow them," Ben said, and left. The prisoners stared at the cleaning supplies as if they were alien artifacts. This was a trick. Had to be. Yet days turned into weeks. The food, while bland, was sufficient. The medical checks were routine. And the obsession with cleanliness was baffling. Ben conducted his inspections with a meticulous eye, not to find punishment, but to enforce a standard of dignity. Akira, trained to decipher an enemy's weakness, could find none in this policy. His men were healthy. Their spirit, while subdued, was not crushed. He was disoriented. The Americans' refusal to dehumanize them was the most effective weapon they could have used. It disarmed his defiance completely. One evening, during a silent inspection, Ben noticed something. Akira's bunk was immaculate. His few personal items arranged with precise care. Their eyes met for a fleeting second. Not a word was spoken, but a thread of mutual bewildered respect was spun in that dusty barracks room. The foundation of their worldviews had just developed its first hairline crack. The tension in the camp was a live wire, humming just beneath the surface of routine. It was a tension Ben felt in his bones. A new contingent of guards had arrived, men who had fought in the Pacific Theater. They carried a visible, simmering hatred for the prisoners. Their leader, Sergeant Moskovsky, a broad-shouldered man with a perpetual scowl, saw Ben's by-the-book approach as weakness. "You're making them a hotel walker," Moskovsky spat one day, watching Ben log the distribution of clean socks. "They're not guests. They're the enemy. They'd slit your throat for a cup of water out there. Don't forget it." Ben didn't forget. But he believed the rules were what separated them from the enemy. The rules were their honor. For Akira, the routine was a lifeline. His men had organized themselves, finding a strange solace in the daily tasks. Cleaning the latrines until they shone wasn't a punishment. It was a practice in discipline, a reclaiming of control in a world where they had none. He noticed the divide among the guards, the quiet professionalism of Corporal Walker versus the open hostility of the new men. He understood the danger there. The conflict erupted not on the parade ground, but in the laundry shed. One of Akira's men, a young private named Kenji, was meticulously folding a stack of towels. Sergeant Moskovsky stormed in, his eyes scanning for an infraction. He zeroed in on Kenji's hands. "What is that?" Moskovsky boomed, pointing to a small handmade wooden folding tool Kenji used to crease the towels perfectly. It was to Moskovsky a potential weapon. Kenji, not understanding the words, bowed slightly and held up the tool, offering it to the sergeant as an explanation. Moskovsky smacked it out of his hand. "You think you can make weapons in my camp?" He grabbed Kenji by the collar and shoved him against the wall. Ben, hearing the commotion, arrived instantly. "Sergeant, stand down. That's an order." This little rat was crafting a shiv, Moskovsky yelled. Akira arrived, drawn by the noise. He saw his man being manhandled, saw the fury on the American sergeant's face, and the calm, firm authority on Corporal Walker's. He knew a single misstep could lead to violence. "It is a tool for folding, Sergeant," Akira said in careful, heavily accented English, stunning both guards into silence. He had been practicing in secret. He bent down, picked up the wooden tool, and with a series of precise, graceful folds, transformed a rumpled towel into a perfect, sharp-creased rectangle. He held it out to Moskovsky. "For dignity, not for war." The shed was silent. Moskovsky was deflated, his anger exposed as baseless. He grunted and walked away. Ben was left staring at Akira, the man who had just spoken perfect English to defuse a situation he himself had been struggling to control. Ben gave a curt nod. "Return to your duties." As Akira turned to leave, Ben stopped him. "Lieutenant." Akira paused. Ben reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal folding ruler. "Here. It's more precise." He held it out. It was an incredible risk. It was metal, could be considered a weapon. Akira looked at the ruler, then at Ben's face. He saw no trap, only a genuine if awkward gesture of understanding. He accepted the gift with both hands, a deep, respectful nod conveying more than words ever could. The thread between them was now a bond, forged in the defense of dignity. But this act of connection had been witnessed, and Ben knew Moskovsky would not forget the humiliation. The gift of the ruler changed everything and nothing. For Ben and Akira, a silent language developed. A nod during roll call. A shared glance acknowledging the absurdity of a situation. They were the two poles of a strange, quiet understanding in the camp. Ben began to see the prisoners not as a monolithic enemy, but as individuals. The young, homesick Kenji, the older, scholarly Private Hashimoto who sketched birds in the dirt. For Akira, Ben became a paradox, the face of his captivity, but also the guardian of his unit's well-being. He was an enemy who behaved with more honor than some of his own countrymen. This cognitive dissonance was a constant, low-grade turmoil in Akira's mind. The tension with Moskovsky's faction grew. They watched Ben. They watched Akira. The metal ruler had been noted. Whispers of collaboration and softness began to circulate among the hostile guards. Ben felt the walls closing in, not from the prisoners but from his own side. His unwavering faith in the rules was now being used as a weapon against him. The external conflict erupted with a devastating revelation. It was during the weekly contraband inspection. Moskovsky, leading the search of the Japanese barracks, made a show of his thoroughness. He tore apart the neatly made beds, emptied footlockers onto the floor, violating the meticulous order the prisoners had created. At the foot of Akira's bunk, buried slightly beneath the floorboards, Moskovsky struck gold. He pulled out a small, hidden bundle. It wasn't a weapon. It was something far more dangerous to the camp's delicate ecosystem. A stash of stolen canned food, a coil of copper wire, and a hand-drawn map of the camp's perimeter. The room went ice cold. Hoarding. Escape planning. These were the ultimate violations. Moskovsky's face was a mask of triumphant fury. He turned to Ben, who was overseeing the inspection. Well, well, Corporal. Look what your pets were cooking up. Right under your nose. So much for your standards of dignity. All eyes turned to Akira. His face was pale, but his posture was ramrod straight. He looked at the items, then directly at Ben. His expression was not one of guilt, but of sheer, unadulterated shock. He gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. Ben was gutted. Betrayal, cold and sharp, lanced through him. He had trusted his protocol. He had, against all his training, begun to trust Akira. He had offered a gesture of respect, and in return, it seemed he had been played for a fool. His entire philosophy, that order and respect could tame the chaos of war, crumbled in that instant. Is this yours? Ben asked Akira. His voice dangerously quiet, devoid of its previous respect. No, Corporal, Akira stated firmly. I have never seen these things. They were in your area, Lieutenant, Moskovsky sneered. Your responsibility. Your failure. Just like your capture. The racist barb hung in the air. Ben, heart hammering against his ribs, made a decision. The rules were all he had left. Lieutenant Tanaka, you are confined to the isolation block. Your men lose yard privileges indefinitely. The entire barracks is on half rations until the culprit is identified. He couldn't look at Akira as he spoke the words. As two guards led Akira away, the lieutenant's eyes never left Ben. They held not anger, but a profound disappointment. It was a look that hurt far more than hatred. Ben had chosen the rule of law over the truth he felt in his gut. He had chosen order over the messy, complicated reality of their connection. He had become the very thing he promised he wouldn't be. Just another jailer. The trust between them was shattered, and the camp descended into a new, darker phase of hostility. The truth in the scars. The following week was the darkest the camp had seen. The once orderly barracks felt like a tomb. The Japanese prisoners, loyal to Akira, closed ranks, their respectful silence replaced with a wall of icy resentment. The hostile guards, emboldened, enforced the new restrictions with gleeful cruelty. Ben's authority was undermined. He was now the corporal who had been duped. Ben was miserable. He replayed the discovery in his mind. Moskovsky's eagerness, the too convenient location of the stash, the look of genuine shock on Akira's face. The rules had told him one thing, but his instinct, the connection he'd felt, told him another. For the first time, he questioned the very system he'd sworn to uphold. The breakthrough came from the unlikeliest source, young Kenji. He approached Ben during a water break, his head bowed. He was terrified not of Ben but of his own men. Speaking to the guard was an act of ultimate treason, but his loyalty to Akira was greater. Corporal Walker, Kenji whispered, his English broken. Mappu, not Tanaka-san. Not for escape. Ben's heart skipped a beat. He led Kenji to a private corner. Speak. Now. Through a painful mix of English and gestures, Kenji revealed the truth. The map was not of the outside. It was an intricate diagram of the camp's new irrigation system, a project Akira had been secretly designing to prevent the barracks from flooding during monsoon rains. The copper wire was for repairs. The food was being saved not for an escape, but for a secret ceremony to honor the first anniversary of their capture, to bolster the failing spirits of the men. It was all an act of leadership, of care. And the culprit who hid it in Akira's area. A bitter, dishonored soldier from another unit who envied Akira's respect and wanted to frame him, hoping the Americans would break him. Moskovsky, eager for any excuse, had either been duped himself or had willingly ignored the context. Ben felt a wave of nausea and shame. He had been so blind. He had upheld the letter of the law and completely violated its spirit. He had failed the ultimate test. He went directly to the camp commander, laying out the evidence Kenji had provided. He staked his own career on it. An investigation was hastily convened. Under pressure, the real culprit broke down and confessed. Moskovsky was reprimanded for his conduct. Ben personally went to the isolation block to retrieve Akira. The lieutenant looked tired, but his spirit was unbroken. He stood as Ben entered. Ben didn't hide behind protocol. He looked Akira in the eye, the way he should have days before. "Lieutenant Tanaka," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "The contraband has been accounted for. The man responsible has confessed. You are exonerated. All privileges are restored. I was wrong. I am sorry." He offered a deep, slight bow of his own. It was a gesture far outside the rules. Akira observed him for a long moment, seeing the genuine remorse. He saw the transformation in the young corporal, from a rigid enforcer of rules to a man who understood the deeper meaning behind them. "The rules are important, Corporal Walker," Akira said quietly. "But they are not what make a man honorable. You have learned this. It is a difficult lesson." The two men walked out of the isolation block together. The Arizona sun was setting, painting the desert in hues of orange and purple. The camp was still a prison, the war was still raging, but something had fundamentally shifted. During the next inspection, Ben entered Akira's barracks. The men were back at their tasks, the air of tension gone. On Akira's footlocker, next to his perfectly folded blankets, lay the metal ruler. It was clean, polished, and placed with intentional care. Ben picked it up. It was no longer just a tool, it was a symbol of a broken prejudice, a forged understanding, and the quiet, resilient power of human dignity to transcend the fences of war. He nodded to Akira, a full, respectful acknowledgement. They were not friends. They were still enemies in a global conflict. But they were two men who had seen the humanity in the other and had chosen, against all odds, to honor it. The greatest surrender had not been on any battlefield, but in their own hearts to compassion.